Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, so today we're really getting into the thick of things with Shakespeare. King Lear, Act 2, Scene 2. This scene, well, it really sets the stage for everything that's going to go wrong.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of you out there are high school students. You're probably going to have to talk about this scene in class.
Yeah.
So we're going to give you some fuel for those discussions, some
Yeah.
interesting angles to think about.
It's an important scene, that's for sure.
So to set the scene, we're at Gloucester's castle. Kent, remember he's disguised as Caius now. He's still totally loyal to Lear even after being banished.
Right.
And he runs into Oswald, Goneril's steward.
Yeah.
It's not a friendly encounter.
Not at all. This is where we see what Kent is really made of. He lets loose with this incredible string of insults directed at Oswald. I mean, it's legendary. A knave, a rascal, an eater of broken meats, a base, proud, shallow, beggarly, three-suited, 100-pound, filthy, worsted stocking knave, and he just keeps going.
I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Just how over the top it is.
Yeah, Shakespeare definitely had a sense of humor.
But it's also serious, right? It tells us something important about Kent's character.
Absolutely. This is about way more than just anger. It's about Kent's complete disgust for anyone who would betray Lear. His loyalty is just fierce. And the language he uses, well, it speaks volumes about some of the big themes of the play, like honesty versus flattery, and the way that order and respect are starting to break down.
Yeah, and all of this tension, it boils over into a physical fight, which just adds to the chaos.
Definitely. And then just when you think things can't get any worse, Cornwall, Regan, and their whole crew arrive.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this is where the power dynamic really starts to shift.
Because now it's not just servants squabbling.
Exactly. Cornwall steps in, and he makes it clear who's in charge. He orders Kent to be put in the stocks, which, by the way, was a punishment that was usually meant for common criminals.
Whoa. Pretty harsh move.
Yeah.
Fetch forth the stocks. It's kind of a chilling line when you think about it.
It really is, and it's symbolic, too, in a lot of ways. By punishing Kent, Cornwall is making a statement about his own power, and about how Lear has lost his standing. It also hints at what's to come in the play, this total disregard for authority and the descent into chaos.
That's definitely something to bring up in class. You know, how the symbolism reflects the play's themes.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how Kent reacts. Even facing this harsh punishment, he doesn't back down. He's defiant. He tells Cornwall, "Sir, I am too old to learn. Call not your stocks for me. I serve the king."
Wow. So he's willing to endure humiliation and pain for Lear, even after Lear banished him.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Where's the line between loyalty and just blindly following orders? Is Kent being foolish, or is he the only one in this scene who's actually being moral?
That's a great question to ask in class, because Shakespeare doesn't give us an easy answer. He wants us to grapple with these difficult questions.
Exactly. And we can't forget about Gloucester in all of this. He tries to stick up for Kent.
Right? He pleads with Cornwall and Regan.
He does, and it shows us that he's got a good heart, especially compared to how cruel Cornwall and Regan are being.
Yeah, but they're not swayed at all.
Yeah.
They see any defense of Lear as a threat.
Right. Gloucester's inability to help Kent in this scene is important too. He can see that what's happening is wrong, but he just doesn't have the power to stop it. And this is actually a foreshadowing of his own tragic downfall later in the play.
Okay, so we've got a lot going on already. Loyalty, power, order breaking down. But we also have to talk about Shakespeare's language.
Yes. It's amazing how much he conveys in every single line. Like, for example, when Kent calls Oswald an epileptic visage, there's so much packed into those few words.
Break that down for us. What's going on there?
Okay, so on the surface, it might just seem like another one of Kent's outrageous insults. But there's more to it. In Shakespeare's time, people often thought that epilepsy was a sign of demonic possession.
So Kent's not just commenting on Oswald's looks.
Right. He's suggesting that Oswald is actually evil deep down. Like there's this darkness lurking beneath his obedient exterior.
Ah, I see. So it ties into that whole theme of appearance versus reality, which is so central to King Lear.
Exactly. Lots of characters in the play aren't what they seem. Like Goneril and Regan, they pretend to love their father, but their real motives are much more sinister.
Right. And this scene, it gives us an early glimpse into these deeper themes, and it shows us how Shakespeare uses language to explore them.
It's brilliant, really. If you can point out these subtle details in class, your teacher will be impressed.
So much to uncover in this scene.
Uh,
But there's still more to come.
oh, yeah, the ending of this scene is crucial. We see Kent all alone in the stocks, and he gives this powerful soliloquy. It hints at all the turmoil that's heading our way. He says, "Fortune, good night. Smile once more, turn thy wheel."
Hmm.
It's a pretty bleak moment, but there's also this defiance in his words.
He's recognizing how bad the situation is, but he's not giving up hope that things could change. It's kind of like Lear himself, isn't it?
Yeah, I see that. Both of them betrayed, cast out, but neither of them is ready to give up on the idea of redemption. This scene really lays the groundwork for their journeys throughout the rest of the play, how their paths kind of mirror each other.
And it brings up that whole Wheel of Fortune idea that was so important back in Shakespeare's time.
Oh, for sure. The idea that fate is always shifting. Someone at the top can easily fall to the bottom. We definitely see that idea being planted here.
Thinking about this from a high school student's perspective, I bet there's so much they could talk about in class. The symbolism of the stocks, the contrast between the different characters, these big questions about loyalty and justice.
Absolutely. And they can also look at how this scene connects to things that happen later on. Like, how does what happens to Kent in the stocks foreshadow what Lear goes through, his descent into madness and suffering?
Or how does Cornwall's cruelty in this scene come back to haunt him later?
Exactly. So many threads that lead right back to this scene.
Speaking of connections, what about the connection between Kent and Oswald? I mean, they're like opposites when it comes to loyalty and morality.
That's a great observation. You could even say they represent two sides of human nature. Kent, he's all about loyalty, honesty, standing up for what's right, even if it means sacrificing himself.
And Oswald is all about ambition, sucking up to whoever's in power, willing to throw away his morals to get ahead.
Right. And the conflict between them in this scene, it's like a smaller version of the bigger conflict between good and evil that we see throughout the play.
Like Shakespeare saying, even in the darkest times, you still have people who are trying to be good and people who give in to temptation.
And he shows us what happens as a result of those choices. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Thinking back to that quote we talked about earlier, epileptic visage, it's just incredible how much Shakespeare can pack into a few words.
He was a master of language, that's for sure. All those layers and nuances. If you want to really impress your teacher, pay attention to how he uses imagery and metaphor. Like when Kent calls Oswald a three-suited, 100-pound, filthy worsted stocking knave. What does that make you picture?
It paints a picture of someone who looks fancy on the outside, but is actually rotten to the core.
Exactly. And that's just one example. Every line in this scene is worth looking at closely.
So for our high school listeners getting ready for a class discussion, what's the most important thing they should take away from this scene?
I would say it's this. This scene is like a miniature version of the whole play. All the major themes, the key conflicts, the forces that drive the tragedy, it's all there.
So if they can really understand this scene, they'll have a much deeper understanding of the whole play.
Absolutely. And they'll be able to participate in class discussions with confidence. They'll have a lot to say.
All right, so to wrap up our deep dive into Act 2, Scene 2, we've covered loyalty, power, justice, order breaking down, the consequences of hasty actions. We've seen how Shakespeare brings these themes to life with such vivid language and symbolism.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully this deep dive has given you all some food for thought, especially if you're facing those class discussions coming up.
Okay, before we sign off, one last thing to think about. We've talked a lot about Kent's loyalty, how it really drives him in this scene. But moving forward in the play, I wonder, what does that loyalty cost him?
Ooh, good point. Because loyalty, especially when it's so unwavering, it can sometimes keep us from seeing the flaws in the people we're so devoted to. Do you think Kent's loyalty to Lear maybe stops him from recognizing Lear's own mistakes, his weaknesses?
Now that is a really interesting question, something to ponder. Could lead to some pretty deep insights about the play's message, about human nature, about how complicated power can be.
And it goes back to something we were talking about before, too. Is there a point where loyalty crosses the line into just doing whatever you're told no matter what? Where do you think that line is?
Yeah. So, as you keep reading King Lear, keep an eye on Kent. How does his loyalty shape his fate? You might be surprised by what you find.
That's a great note to end on, I think.
Yeah. Until next time, folks, keep diving deep.